Good afternoon. This is the November 21st, 2024 Zoning Board of Adjustment regular meeting. My name is Matt Perry and I'm chair of the board. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of quorum.
Board Member Callahan.
Present.
Eicholtz.
Present.
Kranz-Korsch is absent. And Hutchins.
Here.
Ingram.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Matt Perry.
Here.
Smikarova.
Here.
And Wayne.
Here.
There are 8 members present.
So we do have quorum. Thank you. With that, we will proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Is there a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against indicate by saying nay. And that motion passes and the agenda is approved. I believe all the board members have seen a copy of the minutes from the October 10th, 2024 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? If you weren't here last time, please abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, we have
Abstain.
We have 3 abstentions. And with that, the motion passes. The minutes from the Zoning Board of Adjustment October 10th, 2024 meeting are approved. Mr. Ellis, are there any petitions or communications?
Chair Perry, members of the board, there are no petitions or communications this evening.
All right. A reminder to applicants and others, if you're going to speak at the public hearing, please sign in the sheet available from the clerk and speak clearly into the microphone. If you have not signed in, you can do so on your way out. Also to applicants and others, please contact staff after the hearing with any questions regarding your projects. Lastly, if you have something like this, could you turn it off or turn it on silent so as not to disturb today's proceedings? Let's review the agenda. I will read the agenda number and the address of the project and state whether it's slated for consent, continuance, withdrawal, return, or discussion. Consent items are those items that will be passed without discussion by the board. We will be adhering to the staff recommendation found on your agenda under the items recommended motion section. Importantly, any applicable conditions will be listed in the same section. If you agree with this recommendation, including any applicable conditions, you need to do nothing. The board will pass it as recommended. After an item is passed on consent, you are free to leave the chambers. Please check in with the staff member assigned to that item if you have any questions following the decision. If you disagree with the recommendation, please indicate you'd like to speak against that item, and we will put it on the discussion agenda. And discussion items are those items for which the board will take public testimony, deliberate on, and make a decision. After the public testimony has been heard for each particular discussion item, I will close the public hearing for that agenda item. Once I close the public hearing for an item, no additional public testimony will be taken, but staff may be asked to address board questions. After the public hearing for an item is closed, board members will then discuss and act on motions, and the chair only votes in the case of a tie. Let's review the recommended disposition of the agenda items on our agenda today. Agenda item number 5 is 2125 Milwaukee Avenue. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here to speak against this item? I see no one. Agenda item number 6 is 1609 University Avenue Southeast. Agenda item number 7 is 1617 University Avenue Southeast. Agenda item number 8 is 1623 University Avenue Southeast. Agenda item number 9 is 1711 University Avenue Southeast. Agenda item number 10 is 1813 University Avenue Southeast. And lastly, agenda item number 11 is 1815 University Avenue Southeast. All of these are discussion items. So items for consent, we have one, which is item number 5. Is there a motion to adopt this item on consent?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to adopt it on consent and a second. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes. So if you were here for agenda item number 5, your land use request is approved. Good luck with your project. Now we are on to our first discussion item, which is 1609 University Avenue Southeast. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Chair Perry. I'm just going to pull up my presentation. Thank you, members of the board. One note I will make here before kind of starting my presentation, we have 6 items here before you tonight, all regarding the use of artificial turf at a number of congregate living uses along University Avenue. I'm going to give probably the highest level overview of staff findings, relevant code sections in this first application for 1609 University. I just want to make it clear that all of these will obviously apply to all 6 of these items, and staff still plans to give some relevant information on each of those sites individually as we go. Starting first here with PLAN 18664 for 1609 University Avenue Southeast. There are 2 variance requests before you tonight. One to increase the maximum impervious surface of the site from the allowed 75% to a proposed 96%. And secondly, to reduce the required front yard to 0 feet for the area of artificial turf in question. So 1609 University, this is a property that's zoned RM3, a resident in our residence and institutional district. It falls under the Interior 3 Built Form Overlay District. It also falls under the University Area Overlay District, which does not really come into play here tonight. And then finally, this is part of the University of Minnesota Greek Letter Chapter House Historic District. Again, we're talking about kind of 2 things here, impervious surface as well as required yards. Here we have some images. So the bottom left is provided by the applicant. This is with the artificial turf in place in the front yard of this building at 1609. Up in the top left is an aerial photograph from spring of 2018. I think this does actually do a very good point of illustrating the applicant's kind of a question here for unique circumstances. You can see that there's kind of some bare earth there in the spring, as well as then on the top right here in 2019, this is a image taken from Google Street View, where again, that grass is regrown now. I know some of you all were here back in May for a meeting that we had where there were originally, I believe, 6 proposals of appeal of the zoning administrator's decision. That was then whittled down to a single appeal and then would essentially either approve or not allow all those other properties in question. The purpose of that appeal, again, was to really discuss whether or not artificial turf, one, was an impervious or pervious surface under the code, and secondly, if it was a permitted obstruction in a front yard. The eventual outcome of that item, Plans 17-722, which did eventually go to both the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee as well as the City Council on an appeal, was that these artificial turf surfaces were not a permitted obstruction in the required yards, not an example of landscaping, as is called out here in section 54810, where this code language calls out that yards at the ground level shall be covered with turf grass, native grasses, or other perennial flowering plants, vines, shrubs, trees, or edible landscaping. It goes on to provide some additional clarification for wood mulch, landscape rock, which are not seen as kind of a suitable alternative for plant cover. Again, the takeaway there is that staff and the city has essentially said that these artificial turf surfaces are not a replacement for natural landscaping, and as such are an obstruction in that required yard. So again, here to get a bit of an idea of that site and where this turf is located, you can see here the artificial turf in the case of 1609 University was installed in front of the building along that sidewalk. The total lot area is 10,890 square feet. Once we start to break that down into some individual uses, staff has called out here impervious surface, building footprint, the amount of artificial turf, as well as those areas of grass or dirt, so the pervious surfaces that code recognizes on the site. The kind of calculation here shows that the proposed impervious surface for the site would be 96%, leaving again that 4% of grass and dirt, mostly here in the rear yard behind the existing parking area, with artificial turf making up about 8% of that lot. Again, in terms of the relevant zoning here, so this is again RM3 property under the Interior 3 zone or built form overlay district. So typically we'd see a maximum impervious limit of 75% for this lot. And again, similar to landscaping in the front yard, the idea of is this a pervious or impervious material under the code was discussed back in May in front of this body as part of that appeal. The decision there was that this was considered impervious surface. And in this case would be a material which significantly reduces or prevents natural absorption of stormwater into the soil and cause water to run off the surface in greater quantities and at an increased rate of flow. Again, here impervious surfaces include but are not limited to buildings or other structures with roofs, sidewalks, and all stone, brick, concrete, or asphalt surfaces. Again, the purpose for this meeting is not really to relitigate what is or is not an impervious surface that has essentially been established by that appeal of the zoning administrator's determination. Just to give a little bit more background on the history for zoning actions here. So this mostly kicked off in March of this year at a time of a zoning inspector sending order to correct notices to each of the properties that we're going to be discussing tonight regarding that installation of artificial turf. Again, those citations were for impervious surface and obstruction in the front yard. Those kind of proceedings have essentially been paused while these land use applications have been in process. There has not been kind of a ratcheting up of citations or fees, anything like that. Depending on the outcome of this approval as well as other approvals, this would then probably resume back next year in spring. Again, as mentioned, on May 16th, there were 6 appeals originally to the zoning administrator's determination heard by this body. 5 of those were withdrawn before the meeting. Again, the determination between staff and the applicant was that if the appeal for one of these properties was approved, effectively that would address the concerns for all the others. That one that was held through, PLAN 1722-2, was denied 3-1 here at the board. One thing I will note here as we are discussing 1609 University was that that property was not part of that group of appeals back in May, but obviously were affected by the outcomes of those decisions. So in June, that decision of the Board of Adjustment was appealed to the City Council. The Business Housing and Zoning Committee recommended denial of that appeal 4-1, and then that recommendation of denial was approved by the City Council on June 27th. As with all variances within the city, we're looking at primarily 3 prongs of the practical difficulty standards, and we apply those to both the variance requests. So in this case, looking at both of these items in terms of unique circumstances, the applicant called out in their plans both that the area was heavily foot trafficked as well as having heavy clay soils that prevented the growth of natural turf or the maintenance of natural turf. Staff would just point out clay soils are a very common occurrence throughout the state of Minnesota. They are not a unique circumstance to any of these properties. And as shown in some of the other photos, these properties have had natural turf going back decades now in terms of most of these were constructed between 1900 and 1930. For all that time, while those have changed over time, there's been some sort of a front yard element to all of these. In terms of the reasonableness in light of the spirit and intent of the zoning code and the city's comprehensive plan, again, I think staff doesn't feel that these are necessarily unreasonable in terms of appearance. They look relatively similar to a natural turf. But where they fail in staff's eyes is in terms of the intent of the code. As we mentioned already, in terms of those yard controls, I just quote here from section 54800, the purpose statement. Yard controls also play a role in stormwater management, defining public and private spaces, and creating a landscape buffer from ground level residential uses. So again, establishing some of those typical aesthetic styles we see throughout the city, but also having a real impact in terms of stormwater management, creation of natural habitats, et cetera. In terms of section 840 or 540.810, required yards and landscaping, as we've already discussed, that required landscaping is very specific to natural plant cover, whether that is turf, plants, vines, shrubs, trees, edible landscaping. Code does allow for a number of different options for those front yard spaces, but the key note there is really natural landscaping. 540.900, the purpose statement for impervious surface says that maximum lot coverage and maximum impervious surface coverage standards are established to combat the urban heat island effect, promote adequate space for landscaping, reinforce existing or planned development patterns, and to reduce stormwater runoff and encourage the natural absorption of stormwater into the soil. Again, we're making an effort as a community, especially with our private lands, to encourage those types of green spaces, open spaces to remain. In terms of the city comprehensive plan, I would highlight here two of our policies. One, policy 70 around ecology and habitat, the goal of improving the ecological functions of the natural environment in the urban context through planning, regulation, and cooperation. That includes action step C of managing soil health and grow plants for healthy pollinator communities on public lands and promote such planting on private lands. And then secondly, policy 73 of that document, stormwater management. Manage natural areas in and around surface waters, as well as stormwater ponds and other stormwater treatment facilities as areas supportive of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, with an action step of to use infiltration best practices and bioinfiltration to reduce stormwater impacts on surface waters. Again, I would highlight there specifically bioinfiltration, looking to have those natural root systems that do provide a meaningful impact in terms of managing stormwater runoff. Finally, in terms of the essential character potential for injury or detriment to other adjacent properties or the neighborhood, staff does feel that this has been met. Again, from a visual perspective, there's not a significant change between natural and artificial turfs. I think we noted in the staff reports for each of these items, this will be going to, if approved, would go to the Historic Preservation Commission for discussion by that body. I would expect they would probably have more feelings on kind of the essential character. But from a zoning perspective, we see little to no difference between the two. The only other thing that I will mention here in terms of staff does try to examine, are there alternatives that would not require a variance or would require a lesser variance? Again, I think we're sympathetic to the applicant's needs in terms of maintenance around these grass areas, but there are certainly options that are available that would not have involved the wholesale replacement of the natural grass. As we'll talk about with a couple of these different properties, some have put up fencing around some of these turf areas to close it off from the sidewalk, so then folks coming to and from campus do not walk on the grass. There's also options such as aeration of soils to promote better soil health, and obviously there's different types of species besides just typical turf grass, such as clover, that might have either lower watering maintenance needs or maybe a little bit more hardier to that foot traffic. So with all that being said, again, there's two items before you tonight for 1609 University. I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thanks for that presentation, Mr. Campbell. Are there any questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Thanks for your presentation. I just would like to remind myself, or have you remind me, what is the required front yard setback for these instances?
Typically, I believe it's, I don't know if I have it right here. It's a little bit tricky here where we have a typical minimum stated required front yard, but in most cases of residential construction, it actually ends up being based on adjacent properties in this case. So I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but typically we'd be looking at the adjacent buildings.
Right, we'd connect a string, right? Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks for your presentation. Thanks, Chair Perry. So like a wood chip bed would be considered an impervious surface or not if you put plastic underneath it, because that's pretty common to block out root systems. That's still considered a pervious surface, not?
Typically for things, and actually you would see in the packet, so each of these did have a survey provided by a licensed land surveyor. Those did include landscaping / rocks as a category. Staff did not include those, and the applicant did not include those towards pervious amounts because of exactly as you mentioned, Board Member Hutchins, we don't really know what's underneath those, and whether it's a gravel bed or a landscaping bed. One thing I will note is, again, in this section 54810, the second line or the second sentence here, wood mulch, other organic mulches, and landscape rock may be used in planting beds and in maintenance strips adjacent to a building, but are not a suitable alternative to plant cover. Areas wider than 2 feet in width with wood mulch or other organic mulches or landscape rock shall contain plantings spaced not less than 2 feet apart as specified per the planting instructions. Landscape rock that is easily disturbed shall be at least 5 feet or more from public sidewalk or shared property line. All that to say that there are cases where, again, a planting bed or something like that could be in a required yard and not be considered at odds with this landscaping requirement.
And I think, Mr. Hutchins, our decision, one of our decisions beforehand, which you played a role in, actually led to the change in the code to read as it is written today.
I don't know if that was a positive or a negative, Chair Perry. Thanks.
Any other
Thanks for your
questions of
answers, Chair.
staff? I see none. Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. Is the applicant present and would they like to give some testimony? If you could give your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Nick Volley. I'm here on behalf of the applicant with the law firm of Winthrop and Weinstein. Address personally 212 10th Avenue South here in Minneapolis.
Thanks.
So I apologize, members of the board. I did not realize that we would be limited as far as connection hookups for materials on the screen. So a little bit later on, I'm going to pull up my laptop, and if we need to pass it around, great. If not, you can probably see what I'm going to show over here. So I'll refer to that, and of course, if there are any alternative suggestions, I'm all ears. But to quickly get started, similar to staff's way of going about these 6 different applications, I'm going to give a lot of detail in this first one and speak a little bit more broadly about the applications, and then as well provide some more specifics to this property here at 1609. So again, as staff covered, the total area is 10,890 square feet. We're asking for a 96% coverage for impervious surface area. And to provide some clarity on that before we get down to the 3 different categories that we need to review, I want to make sure that it's clear we're asking for this variance specific to the turf improvements that are placed on the property. And with the benefit of a variance, the applicant would be more than happy to help or just accept reasonable restrictions or conditions on that variance. And so what I'm getting at there is we can limit this variance to solely artificial turf improvements, specifically residential grade artificial turf, as well as provide annual maintenance or semi-annual maintenance and inspections that we would then give to the city on a recurring basis, if that would be helpful. So I want to make sure that there's a big picture here. We're not asking for this variance in a vacuum to, after it's approved, go and pave it all over with concrete. So I want to make sure that that's out there. I would continue to throw a quick note out about drainage, given that was repeated a couple of times in staff's report. I know some of you had the benefit of hearing our presentation prior and being able to see the drainage demonstration and how the turf allowed water to go all the way through in order to manage stormwater runoff. I would just encourage you to remember that detail as we go through these various categories. All right, enough with general background. Let's go through the standards. As staff reminded us, the first one is the practical difficulties standard. I think in this particular case, the hard clay and heavy foot traffic of this particular area is a unique circumstance that prevents each applicant from being in compliance with the code as written. As we talked about, these impervious surface area requirements are rigidly outlined in the city's code. And even if the turf was not there, because of these hardships, the property still would not be in compliance with the city code, given that the only thing that would be left is hard rock and mud that's left over. And as part of that, I think it's specifically unique in this area, as we can see, based on the neighboring properties up and down University. And so I'd like to just quickly... I don't know if this is really going to work, guys, but... So I don't have an HDMI because it's a Mac, and so I just need a converter.
So what you may be able to do is lay it on that white device. Oh,
I think we have the technology.
Thank you so much.
great.
We have a little Best Buy over here.
Yep, the plague. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oops.
There we go. Can everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Great. I'm just going to move this over so we can toggle as we talk. Now, if it's going out on my screen, is it also going out on yours, or is it?
Yes.
Now we're just super still. Okay. So where I was going is, this is clearly a unique issue. It clearly complicates complying with the statute. These are a couple of the surrounding neighbors' properties. I'm going to get into a few more, but clearly, I mean, grass is not growing in this area. There's a couple from this period of the year, a couple from the spring and summer months. They're both held by other fraternal organizations as well as other private businesses in the area. So there's a pretty good mix here, and clearly shows the difficulties that folks in this area of the city, both because of the heavy clay, but also the heavily trafficked areas, on continuing to be able to grow natural grass that looks good all year long. This is another couple of examples. This is the private company that I mentioned earlier, along with a couple of other community organizations and fraternal organizations up and down University, all within a block or 2 blocks, depending on the slide we're at, of the subject property here. To further illustrate this point, a couple more. I don't need to belabor the point at all, but a couple more. To further illustrate the point here, these are three of the subject properties prior to the turf installation, showing the wear and tear and inability to continue to keep and maintain grass growing on site. I would also note, as additional background, each of the applicants have gone through a number of different trial and errors with seeding, irrigating, and the list goes on and on as far as what they've tried to do in this case. And yes, as staff has pointed out, there are certain periods of time in the year where that grass looks fine. The primary point is that it doesn't last and it doesn't stay there. These are the proposed improvements that are currently existing on the property. Not only from an aesthetic perspective, the properties look great, but I would also just make mention that it's also consistent with the rest of the neighborhood as far as what you can see. I would also point out that, again, it is properly draining, as we were able to demonstrate during the last few meetings here, and I don't want to relitigate that issue at all, but I do want to point it out. And then on top of that, if we coupled these variance requests with reasonable conditions, we could, I think, easily come up with realistic conditions and restrictions that really meet the city's concerns with respect to these areas. These are the other 3, just for reference. Moving on to the second category. The second category is the reasonableness manner and keeping with the spirit of the code. Within staff's report, they had mentioned things like urban heat island effect, promote adequate space for landscaping, reinforce existing or planned development patterns, and to reduce stormwater runoff. I would argue that these improvements continue to hold all of these categories consistent. I would also mention, because of the stormwater runoff that we mentioned, I think it's also consistent with other planned areas within this area from an all practical purpose. Again, I mean, we're not talking about anything drastically different here. To promote adequate space for landscaping, I would note, as staff mentioned, and as included in the surveys submitted in each file, there are other landscaped areas that are not included in these calculations. As a reasonable condition, if we wanted to see more, we could look into that in other areas of the property, whether that's shrinking parking or whether that's, putting a frontage end to reduce the overall turf as well. I think that there are avenues for that. I would also note that as far as the current city relevant sections of the city code for both setbacks and impervious surface area, the city code requires the area of this front lawn to be clear from ground to ceiling. That's clearly still the case with turf for all practical purposes. It's also not hindering the overall purpose of a setback requirement by implementing improvements that could be considered dangerous and impede into the public right-of-way or create trip hazards or things like that. For all intents and purposes, this is grass. So, and then I won't talk about the third category at all. I'm happy to answer questions on it, but given it was deemed accepted by city staff, I don't think I need to belabor the point any further. At this time, I would just, again, reiterate the reasonable conditions that could be attached to this, such as residential turf for the installation and maintenance of turf improvements only, annual or semi-annual maintenance inspections, required to use a licensed vendor, and I think city staff referenced it earlier, we could also use the condition for approval of the city's historical society as well, prior to deeming this approved and effective. So, with that, I will open up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for your presentation. Are there any questions of the applicant? Yes, Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks, Chair Perry. Thanks for giving the presentation.
Thank you for making it possible.
I'll start out and saying I think it does look better. I think it looks good the way you have it. The problem I think everybody here is going to have is that your assertion, and you proved it, that everybody in the neighborhood faces the same problem, right? We have to find something that goes with that specific property, not the neighborhood. We don't have the ability to create conditions from this board's perspective. The city would have to go out and enforce forever. We don't have that authority. So what about that specific piece of property is unique? I think you proved it isn't, because everybody's facing the problem. So finding one we'd find it hard to meet unless you have a perspective there that I'm missing.
I don't think I have an alternative perspective here. I think that when looking at this property, it's unique in the sense that even with those same categories that reach across the neighborhood, this property is still unique in the sense that those same circumstances, those unique circumstances, we're not able to comply with the code, right? Because as the code is written, we got to have natural grass there, and we can't. So I understand your point completely. I do. But
Can I ask a clarifying question of staff?
Sure.
do you want me to walk away?
No.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't create variance and give a bunch of provisions that have to be enforced by staff for the next million years.
Chair Perry, Board Member Hutchins, I would probably caution against that just from the perspective of city does not have, similar to permeable pavers, are a case where, again, a permeable paver has, with correct maintenance and design, et cetera, can function as a pervious surface. City code treats those as impervious simply because we do not have the enforcement capacity to go in, confirm those, go and inspect every 10 years, et cetera. That's just something that's not feasible right now for our zoning enforcement staff.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? I see none. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Is there anyone to speak in favor of this in addition? Is there anyone to speak against this? I'll close the public hearing. Board comment? Yes, Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you, Chair Perry. I'm still see a strong agreement with staff findings here. Talking about drainage and adding clauses and rules and regulations. I keep thinking that if this owner moved and a different owner moved in, would the grass grow? Probably. So I think it's a sad excuse to blame that. And I do believe there are other natural things that could be done here. So I'm strongly in favor of staff findings.
Thanks for those comments. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Eichholz.
Yeah, I'll just kind of echo the same thing, and really exactly what Hutchins said was what I was going to be saying too. Is I don't know how I could find something unique to a specific property if it's pretty obvious that condition exists throughout the whole neighborhood. And I live in the area, and so I'm familiar with the area and all that kind of thing. I don't think foot traffic is, outside of people's control, or just like some natural, outside occurrence that's happening to them. I think there's ways that we could get around and discourage, some degree of that. They mentioned too, that they could look at other landscaping in other areas of the property. And I think that's something for them to consider, because if there was other pervious surface in other areas of the property, then they could meet the requirements, even if this is impervious. So I'm in agreement with staff findings as of right now.
Thanks for those comments. Anyone else? I would entertain a motion then from someone.
I make a motion to support staff findings.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion that is properly before us? I see no one. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Callahan.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Eicholtz.
Aye.
Ingram.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Aye.
And Wayne.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
That motion passes, and the variance requests, both of them are denied. And you can talk to staff about what your options are going forward. So let's move on to 1617 University Avenue Southeast. I think Mr. Campbell is, as you mentioned, if you could speak to the specifics of this property and not the general statements that you did before with the other, that would be great. And hopefully technology will cooperate with us.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Yes, and I will kind of specifically talk about the lot in question. So for the second item here, we are discussing 1617 University Avenue Southeast, just actually one property over from the previous. This is plan number 18664. This is for the Sigma Chi fraternity building. This building was built in 1927. You can see again here the brick L-shaped building here in the top left corner, as well as a image from the 2021 Google Street View image, and then from 2024 again, current from the applicant. Zoning remains the exact same as for 1609. Again, the relevant zoning codes as well. In terms of the property itself, this is also a 10,890 square foot lot. The building footprint here is 2,777 square feet, making up about 26% or just over a quarter of the lot. The artificial turf here is right around 6% of the lot's total area at 659 square feet, with the areas of kind of open grass or dirt being 500 square feet or 5% roughly of that total. Again, that would put this at a 95% impervious surface total. And as with the last item, this does go directly up to that front property line. Again, similar in terms of action history, and staff findings remain the same.
All right. Any questions to staff? Yes.
It might be a silly question, but is there allowed to just be dirt? Does it have to be something? Can it just remain dirt?
I believe there is some language in specifically our nuisance code in terms of maintaining. The language in code here does say that, again, those required yards shall be covered with turf grass, native grasses, or other perennial flowering plants, vines, shrubs, trees, or edible landscaping. I can't speak to the kind of zoning enforcement staffs, how often we are writing correction orders for that type of activity. I don't know if Mr. Ellis would have a clearer idea of zoning enforcement activity, but I don't think it's typically something that we're writing a lot of orders for.
Got it. Thanks.
I would know. I mean, On a regular basis, with new construction especially, the zoning inspectors are out there on a regular basis looking at the planting standards. But as noted, we don't generally go back once that's done. We just, once the new construction's completed and they're to our site plan review standards, then we don't go back. But it does come up at that point primarily.
Any other questions? I see none. Thanks. Let's open the public hearing. Mr. Voley, again, if you could do the same, if you could keep it specific to this property, the uniqueness aspects of it, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the board. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm going to reiterate all of our same arguments for this property and open myself up for questions if you have them. Quick note on the last question. I think it was pretty clear dirt was not contemplated in that list of permitted impervious or pervious surface area, which is why we're claiming that we're having a tough time being in compliance with removing the turf. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the applicant? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to speak against this? I see no one. Let's close the public hearing. Board comment. I will just say one thing about dirt in the front yard, because I suffer from in my own property, very clay-like soil, and I have never had anybody call on me. I also find it, I have to do a lot of work to get grass to grow, but it can be done. So I'm not speaking, I mean, that's anecdotally. I just know that there are some properties around the city where there's clay-like soil, and it's very hard to grow grass or grow anything, but it can be done. Yes.
Allow a motion
Yes.
to accept staff findings?
Yes. It's moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? I'm sorry. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Callahan?
Aye.
Eicholtz?
Aye.
Hutchins?
Aye.
Ingram?
Aye.
Johannesson?
Aye.
Smikarova?
Aye.
Wang?
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
And so those variance requests are denied. Let's move on to 1623 University Avenue Southeast.
Thank you, Chair. So 1623 University Avenue Southeast, PLAN 16 or 18664. Again, this is also a property owned by the Sigma Chi fraternity. This was built in 1916. In terms of looking at the lot area, similar to the rest of ones we've talked about here, the artificial turf in question is in the front yard of the property. Makes up roughly 3% of the total lot area here. The overall impervious surface here is actually a little bit lower than some of the other ones we'll talk about tonight at 91%. That's due to the presence of grass and dirt in the rear part of that lot. Slightly smaller than some of the other ones we've talked about so far, but again, the points from staff in terms of findings remain the same.
Questions? None? Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. Mr. Voley again.
Thank you, members of the board. I would again reiterate my arguments from earlier and encourage you to ask any questions you have of me at this time. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Okay. Are there any questions? I see none.
Thank you.
Anybody like to speak against this item? I see none. Let's close the public hearing. Board comment or motion?
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
I make a motion to support staff findings.
Second.
It's moved and seconded, and we have a proper motion before us. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Callahan?
Aye.
Eicholtz?
Aye.
Hutchins?
Aye.
Ingram?
Aye.
Johannesson?
Aye.
Smikarova?
Aye.
And Wang?
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
All right, on to 1711 University Avenue Southeast.
Chair Perry and members of the board, so 1711 University Avenue Southeast. One note here, and you all should have gotten a correction memo before the meeting. So in this case, the variance request in the staff report was listed as to 100%. This is actually to 97% of the total lot area. 1711 University Avenue Southeast is owned by Phi Beta Psi. This is a property built in 1930. Again, we have some of the existing photos as well as the previous street views. This is a 8,679 square foot lot. About 27% of that is taken up by the actual building on the lot. Here, the artificial turf is around 930 square feet, or about 11% of the lot's total area, putting this at a total of 97% impervious. And again, staff's findings in terms of this does not meet the unique circumstances clause, does not meet reasonable use, but finds that it meets essential character.
All right. Questions of staff? None? Thank you. We'll open the public hearing.
Thank you, members of the board. I would again reiterate our arguments earlier, and we'll stand for questions.
Sure. And for the record, that was Mr. Voley speaking. Any questions? None? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone like to speak against this item? I see no one. And I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion. Unless somebody has a comment.
I make a motion to adopt staff findings.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Callahan.
Aye.
Eicholtz.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Ingram.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Aye.
And Wayne.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
And that motion denies both requests, and you can see staff about what to do following that. 1813 University Avenue Southeast is agenda item number 10. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. 1813 University Avenue Southeast. This is a property that was built in 1927. Again, here you can see some images from the front of that property as well as the photo provided by the applicant. In terms of the site conditions here, again, this is a lot that's a little bit smaller than some of the other ones we talked about at 6,683 square feet. That building footprint is right around, again, about a quarter of the lot at 26%. Here, the area of artificial turf of 790 square feet makes up 12% of the total lot area. And in this case, I believe, yes, there's 13 square feet that were measured by the surveyor of grass and dirt. But otherwise, this would be considered 100% impervious under the city code. Findings remain as they are, and that unique circumstances and reasonable use have not been met.
Thank you. Questions of staff? None? Thank you. We'll open the public hearing.
Good evening, members of the board. Nick Volley, on behalf of the applicant, I would hereby reiterate my arguments from earlier, and will stand for questions.
Any questions of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And would anyone like to speak against this item? I see no one. Let's close the public hearing. Board comment or motion?
I'd move to adopt staff findings.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to adopt staff findings. And I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Callahan.
Aye.
Eicholtz.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Ingram.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
So the requests are denied, and you can see staff about what to do following this meeting. 1815 University Avenue Southeast, our last item, which is number 11 on our agenda. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Chair Perry. 1815 University Avenue Southeast, plan number 18661. This property was, the structure on the property was built in 1928. Again, just adjacent to the previous item, one over to the southeast. You can see here again some images for the site, both in the past as today. This lot is 8,901 square feet by the applicant survey. The building footprint here is 2,908 square feet for 33% of the lot's total area. Similar to the last item, the amount of grass or dirt on this site is 0% or 0 square feet, putting it at 100% impervious surface. The artificial turf in this case makes up about 860 square feet. Staff findings remain as they have been. It does not meet the unique circumstance clause as well as the reasonable use clause.
All right. Questions of staff? I see none. Thank you. Let's open the public hearing. Yes, sir.
Good evening, members of the board. Nick Foley on behalf of the applicant. I would reiterate my arguments from earlier and will stand for questions.
Any questions of the applicant? I see none.
Thank you.
Very much. Anyone like to speak against this item? I see none. Let's close the public hearing. Board comment or a motion?
I would make a motion to support staff findings.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to support staff findings. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Callahan?
Aye.
Eicholtz?
Aye.
Hutchins?
Aye.
Ingram?
Aye.
Johannesson?
Aye.
Smeekarva?
Aye.
And Wayne.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
All right, those requests are denied, and you can see staff about what to do following this decision. And with that, we have addressed our land use requests for today. Agenda number 12 is the 2025 BOA meeting dates. Just a quick update on this. If you took a look at it and you said, oh, I can't do that date, staff has told us before and will tell us again that these dates are pretty much keyed off the council and other committee dates. So even though they might not work for us, they have to. So I would entertain any comments or questions, though. With that said.
I do appreciate them being like meeting invites on the calendar.
Oh, yes.
That's pretty nice.
Okay.
I mean, still don't like that we have the Outlook requirement, but the meeting invites are good.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that comment. So we do have to approve this, and I would entertain a motion to approve the calendar as presented by staff.
So moved.
It's moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Callahan?
Aye.
Eicholtz?
Aye.
Hutchins?
Aye.
Ingram?
Aye.
Johannesson?
Aye.
Smeekarva?
Aye.
And Wayne.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
So our calendar is adopted for 2025. Thank you very much. Are there any updates, new or old business? Maybe, Mr. Ellis, you could just talk about the replacement. This should have been under communications and petitions, but the replacement for Mr. Johannesson. We don't have anyone.
Yeah, Chair Perry, that is correct. There will be no one in the short run replacing Board Member Johannesson. We will be looking again during the spring recruitment cycle. And then the others are moving forward. The reappointments are moving forward. They will be at the December 12th City Planning Commission. That isn't mostly, it's not technically a public hearing on that. The public hearing for this would be at the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee, which at this point will be sometime in January.
Right. Very good. Thank you very much. That I consider kind of old business. And with that, our next meeting is December 12th, 2024. It is our only meeting in December, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.